This is take 4. Welcome to the Literature of Exploration. I'm your host, Sean Connelly. I'm here to help introduce you to the material we'll be looking at a greater depth. As this cover slide shows, knowledge of the New World and the way the natural world worked was very, very sparse at best. Enter explorers to help dispel some of those earlier assumptions about what laid out there. But they also had other agendas as well. We'll be looking at 3 Spanish explorers today, and you will be asked to talk about them in your discussion post for this week, and you will also be asked to talk about John Smith. So Christopher Columbus. Here's the guy. We all know about him already. He's known for discovering the New World. But of course, we also know that historical records show that he was not the first European to set foot in North America. That honor belongs, as far as we know, to Leif Erikson, a Scandinavian who did so in about the 10th century. We also know that he made 4 voyages to and from the New World. Very lucrative voyages at first, but he is not without his problems. He does get put on a pedestal, especially in American culture, as being this heroic discoverer. What is not part of that history that is common to most people is that there were mutinies against him by settlers and angry investors in Hispaniola. Hispaniola is now what is present-day Haiti and Dominican Republic. And he also had a shipwreck off of Jamaica. So we kind of flubbed it up. He got there early. He took that area that we now call the Caribbean or the Antilles or the West Indies and named it the West Indies. He's the one who was responsible for the name Indians, even though they were not from India in the slightest. Here is a nice cover piece from the Columbus letter, and these are basically his words to the King Ferdinand, the Spanish crown, regarding his journeys and what he wanted to accomplish, why things went wrong, where he should be now. And when we look at those Christopher Columbus writings, you're going to see towards the end that he is not a shipwreck, but a human wreck. He's poor. He's been thrown in jail. He was suffering from disease. Some people even say it was venereal disease. It did not end well for him, far from the heroic story that we know today. And if you look at this frontispiece, what you will notice is that he doesn't look a whole lot like an explorer. He's wearing full armor and carrying shields. He looks like a conquistador. And what he did in the Indies is he conquered. So let's keep that in mind. And we have his 4 routes laid out right here. Notice that very first one on the top. And then we have the second one, the 93 one. Then we have the third one. And then we've got the 4th one, which is the most disastrous, where he shipwrecked. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that he was part of a wealth trade. He was there to bring gold and servants and other forms of wealth back to the Spanish Empire. The next individual you will be reading is Bartolome de las Casas. Now, he is an important figure, and in some ways, the really redemptive persona involved in Spanish exploration. He first came to the New World in 1502 with the Royal Governors Group, so a little bit after Columbus, but he was there very early on. He also was ordained as a priest in 1510, the first priest to be ordained in the Americas. He also was really important because he actually put forward the idea of Native American rights. In other words, he was even a precursor of a movement that we would now maybe call universal human rights. Um, he he wanted slavery to end in the Spanish Empire, and he was also against the Spanish labor system known as encomienda, and basically says that if you are an explorer and a conqueror, you can take anybody who's not a Christian and make them your slave. And that's just the way it works, that it was God ordained in some way. You can see how this hierarchy, really does affect the way Europeans look at native peoples. But he railed against this because of the horrors that he saw. And finally, he wrote an extremely influential book called A Short Account of the Destruction of the Indies. And it was so detailed and so forthright in its explanation of the atrocious treatment of the native peoples, the Taínos of the Caribbean, that it helped bring the passage of the new laws of 1542, which basically abolished native slavery for anybody involved in the European colonial system. And this was something that was put forward and into law by the Holy Roman Emperor of the time. Now, Las Casas route was singular and basically involved what we might call the Greater Antilles. Star Wars fans, you will realize that's no relation to Wedge. George Lucas loved stealing names. So mostly around Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Jamaica, south end of Cuba, where he had most of his experience. And one of the things that he did was also appropriate important experience that he saw firsthand to tell people about the unchristian and really unequitable behavior of the Spanish, who were Christians, who believed in God. By the way, you will notice dismemberment up here, people burning over, spits of fire, the slow hanging of people and burning of people from the feet up. So we've got body parts here, the hanging of the nobles of the natives. The conquistadors in general treated them as sport, as game, like fighting animals. Now, if you really want to know more about Columbus, if you're feeling a lot of pushback where people are saying, but Columbus was great, he was amazing, this cancel culture is, it's just bonkers, I would have them go to the Oatmeal comics page, where there's a very well-researched treatment of Columbus and who he was, how he got to be important, and what he really did. And it's a great web comic if you are not familiar with it. This looks a little dark, but you know what? He's fun. He gets to the point, and he's really, really great. Basically, what he does is say that Columbus was a torturer, a murderer, a sex trafficker of native girls as young as the ages of 9 and 10. That he only became the subject of a national holiday in the 1930s in the United States, where a group of Catholic organizations led by the Knights of Columbus, which is a fine organization, wanted a Catholic hero to look up to. And, anti-Catholic sentiment was very high at that point. So, okay, you got to give him that. But he was just an atrocious person overall. Anyway, check it out. It's really great. And Bartolome de las Casas, of course, is so important in helping people understand why we should be looking at somebody else to have an important national holiday. And he makes the case for Las Casas Day.